We're finally learning about some key design choices for the planned replacement for the Interstate Bridge, including the selection of light rail as the included mode of mass transit. And if you're a Portland or Vancouver resident, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, haven't we done this already? And yes, you'd be right. So how did we get here? Again? The Interstate Bridge's two spans date back to 1917 and 1958, and they share several deficiencies, including no shoulder lanes, a claustrophobic pedestrian walkway, and a drawbridge segment that regularly grinds traffic to a halt. And there's a less visible problem, as illustrated by this video from the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program Office. The bridge's columns rest on pilings that don't actually reach all the way down to the bedrock, which means they could be dislodged by soil liquefaction. In other words, when the big one, the Cascadia megaquake, arrives, the bridge is not the place you're going to want to be.
Anthony, this bridge has been talked about for over a quarter of a century. It goes back to the 90s.
That's Greg Johnson, program administrator for the current replacement effort. The first attempt at a modern replacement was the Columbia River crossing, which got started in 2004. The project got pretty far into the planning process, including the selection of a locally preferred alternative, or LPA, which is a conceptual design that finalizes the high-level details like how many lanes the new bridge will have and where it will cross the river. The LPA also specified that the new bridge would include light rail, which you might recall became a bit controversial on the Washington side of the river and played a role in the collapse of the project after the Washington Senate failed to advance the state's share of construction funding in 2013. There were also disagreements about the bridge's height and the expected tolling revenue. Failure left Oregon and Washington with a new problem. They'd already spent about $140 million in federal funding on the Columbia River crossing, and that money was contingent on the new bridge getting built. The deadline was several years down the road, but eventually the states would either need to restart the project or pay the money back.
So the feds are actually looking at that provision and seeing if that is still something that they want to do. But that was part of the impetus to get this back going. But really, the impetus is that this is a growing region that is dependent upon two bridges to cross the Columbia River. And one is already vastly overused, the I-205 Glenn Jackson Bridge, carries 170,000 vehicles per day. And the second bridge is a 105-year-old bridge that, once again, is outdated and carries 143,000 vehicles per day.
The decision to restart came in 2019. Both state legislatures allocated some initial funding, and Governors Kate Brown and Jay Inslee opened a new bi-state development office, resulting in the creation of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, which probably not coincidentally does not include the words Columbia or river or crossing anywhere in the title. State lawmakers and project officials have sought to portray the new project as a return to the drawing board with a from-scratch design process. But it isn't an entirely fresh start. The Columbia River Crossing's LPA had already gone through the federal environmental review process and gotten a green light by the time the project stalled out. That federal approval is still valid, and state officials hope to save time and money by reusing it for the new project with a supplemental update. But that means the new design has to stick at least relatively closely to the original. Critics have argued that the constraint makes the new project little more than a redressed Columbia River crossing, and that it would be an ill-advised freeway expansion at a time when cutting carbon emissions should be paramount. But project officials insist they still have room to change up the design to address the ways in which the region has grown and changed in the past decade, and to make some fundamental improvements, including adding new design criteria to better address climate and equity issues. So, where do things stand right now?
We're not quite caught up to where CRC, because CRC achieved the last federal approval step. They received a record of decision. They had permits in place. So all of those things have to be redone, and that's the process that getting this locally preferred alternative and taking it through the supplemental process. By the time we are done with that, that's when we will have pretty much caught up to where CRC was.
At the very least, the new project has already managed to dodge the specific bullet that killed its predecessor. The Washington legislature approved $1 billion earlier this year to cover the state's half of the construction funding. A new conceptual design is not far behind. The program office narrowed it down to 2 possible configurations today. They both include light rail, but they differ in the number of auxiliary lanes on the bridge and the configuration of the interchanges on the Portland side of the river. The office is scheduled to choose one of those 2 as its final recommendation at a meeting in May. The goal is for state lawmakers and partner agencies to review the proposal and give it a thumbs up in July. The next few years would be spent on design work, with construction beginning in 2025 if everything stays on track.
If we're going to hit those dates, we need to have a series of things happen. And so this is the first domino that needs to fall, is that we go into the supplemental environmental impact statement this summer. So that's the reason we have that July date set out there. We're also going to have to come before the Oregon legislature during their 2023 session to match what the Washington state legislature has done as far as funding commitments. Then that allows us to start getting in line and applying for federal grants to help define what the funding picture will look like for this bridge.
As for what's on the way this year, we can expect to see a lot of public discussion about the proposed bridge design. We'll also find out whether light rail remains as much of a hot-button issue as it was 10 years ago, and whether the IBR program can manage to chart a course through it and any other controversial aspects of the design.
We know that those issues are going to be very intense, and there's passion on both sides of it. So our goal is to present the technical merits of each of the choices that we make, and recognizing that, once again, this is not just a local bridge. This is an international connector between Mexico and Canada on the West Coast that connects a lot of ports and moves goods and services for vast differences headed all over the United States and actually all over the world. So we have to keep that as a backdrop, that this is not just a local bridge. But we have done the analysis, and we are ready for the discussion of what our choices that our team is going to put forward.
And that's how we got here.